In Washington, as showdown is coming this week over Neil Gorsuch, President Trump's nominee for the Supreme Court. With a divided Senate, the Republicans are threatening to resort to a drastic measure to win the confirmation of Gorsuch. NBC's Kelly O'Donnell has more now from the White House.
Not every Capitol Hill showdown carries the weight of history.
Judge Gorsuch has outstanding legal skills.
But this time, it does.
I am honored and I am humbled.
49-year-old Colorado-based federal judge Neil Gorsuch could begin a lifetime appointment to the Supreme Court by Friday.
What I can tell you is that Neil Gorsuch will be confirmed this week. How that happens really depends on our Democratic friends.
That's where more history comes in. A Supreme Court nominee has never been blocked by a partisan filibuster. But Democrats will try to stop Gorsuch by insisting on the Senate's rule requiring 60 votes.
It's highly, highly unlikely that he'll get 60.
Republicans need 8 Democrats to move the Gorsuch nomination to a final vote. Today, Indiana Senator Joe Donnelly announced his support, joining West Virginia's Joe Manchin and North Dakota's Heidi Heitkamp. Democrats from red states Trump won. Democrats point to President Obama's selection of Merrick Garland last year. Republicans block Garland, arguing the election should determine this seat. Now, outside groups are spending millions.
Neil Gorsuch has been called a natural successor to Justice Scalia.
For and against.
We can't just sit back and let it happen.
Expect to see a dramatic step known as the nuclear option. Republicans would change Senate rules, override Democrats, and confirm Gorsuch on their own. Democrats also forced a rules change for lower court judges when they were in power. But this kind of tradition breaking comes with a price. Eroding the Senate's history is a place where the minority party gets a voice. But with the stakes so high, Republicans are determined to give President Trump a much-needed win. Kate?
Kelly O'Donnell at the White House. Kelly, thank you. The North Korean nuclear threat will be high on the agenda when President Trump hosts the leader of China this week. In an interview with the Financial Times out tonight, the president warns if China is not going to solve North Korea, we will. Lester Holt is in South Korea tonight, where he'll be broadcasting for the first part of the week. He sets the scene for us not far from the demilitarized zone separating North and South Korea.
You don't have to travel very far outside Seoul to see signs and reminders of how close it sits to a dangerous and unpredictable neighbor. People in South Korea are used to the bellicose statements and the dangerous threats coming from Kim Jong-un. But this time things are different, according to experts, that things are more perilous for 3 reasons. Kim Jong-un's discussion of trying to develop a longer-range missile and miniaturized nuclear weapons. Also, the political turmoil here in the South. Its president recently impeached and arrested over corruption charges. Then there's a stronger language coming out of Washington. Secretary Tillerson, Secretary of State, recently talking about keeping military options on the table. Defense Secretary James Mattis only Friday talking about this.
We're working with our allies, and we are working diplomatically, including with those that we might be able to enlist in this effort to get North Korea under control. But right now, it appears to be going in a very reckless manner in what its conduct is portraying for the future, and that's got to be stopped.
A continuing bone of contention are the joint U.S.-South Korea military exercises going on right now, which we'll be covering this week. China, acting as an intermediary of sorts, has suggested the U.S. might be able to suspend those military exercises. But, Kate, the U.S. and South Korea both say that's a non-starter.
Lester, thanks. And Lester Holt will anchor nightly news from South Korea tomorrow and Tuesday nights with much more on the North Korean threat. With the Trump administration cracking down on undocumented immigrants, one group that has not received as much attention in this debate is Asians who are here illegally. Their numbers have grown in recent years. In Los Angeles, NBC's Jacob Soboroff spoke with some of them.
President Trump wants to build a wall with Mexico to keep out undocumented immigrants. But the reality is, in recent years, people are coming from a different continent and on a different mode of transportation entirely.
I'm Asian American, but I'm Korean, and when I tell people that I'm undocumented, the first thing they do is nothing, because they're confused. So it's kind of a conflicting thing.
Because most people associate the issue of undocumented immigration with the border, with Latinos primarily, with Mexicans.
Right.
After peaking at 12.2 million in 2007, America's undocumented population stands at just over 11 million today. The number of undocumented people from Mexico has dropped by more than 1 million, while the number of undocumented Asians has risen to around 14% of the overall total.
So you found out you're undocumented, and then you apply to Harvard, and what, against, in your mind, all odds, you end up here?
Yeah.
Jin is protected from deportation by DACA, the Obama administration policy. But most undocumented Asians, like most undocumented people overall, came to the U.S. as adults and aren't protected.
So this is your brother?
Yeah. Yes.
And that's your fiance?
Yes.
So you're undocumented too?
Yeah.
And how about you?
Yeah, same.
Also undocumented?
Yeah.
And did everybody come here on an airplane?
Yeah.
And everybody just decided we're gonna overstay our visa, we're gonna compromise our visa, and now we're gonna be in the United States illegally?
We are here to stay.
Will a wall stop people coming from the Philippines?
No.
Because we came here legally with a visa, tourist visa. We cannot swim from the Philippines up to here.
That'd be a far swim. Jacob Soboroff, NBC News, Los Angeles.
Still ahead tonight, it became a symbol of racial tension in this country almost 3 years ago now. Now, as Ferguson, Missouri prepares for an election, we look at what's changed and what hasn't. On Tuesday, Ferguson, Missouri will be back in the headlines again. The city that became synonymous with racially biased policing and protest votes for a new mayor for the first time since the deadly police shooting of an unarmed teenager there. The choice for voters is between an incumbent and a challenger who deeply disagree about how much progress Ferguson has made. Here's NBC's Ron Allen.
Mayor James Knowles versus City Council member Ella Jones. Knowles, the face of Ferguson during the unrest following the fatal shooting of Michael Brown, an unarmed teenager, by a Ferguson police officer. The incumbent seeking 3 more years to lead this deeply scarred city.
I think Ferguson needs to make sure that we continue to have steady leadership moving forward.
But why isn't it not time to turn the page? The police chief's different, the city manager.
I think you just said it. We did turn the page.
Jones, a former businesswoman, elected to city council right after the unrest. A more diverse council in a city with a majority black population, along with a new city manager, police chief, and chief judge.
Ferguson needs a mayor who care about all people, not some of the people.
Deep mistrust of the police still simmers. Last month, anger flared when some claimed video of Michael Brown, newly made public, proved police had hidden evidence. Police said the footage was irrelevant. A department struggling to recruit more officers, down about 25%, and carry out court-ordered reforms, like more cops on the street, after the Department of Justice found it discriminated against poor black residents. These 3 activists were involved in months of protests.
There hasn't been any interaction with the police department in a way that would renew community trust.
Many see a tale of 2 cities. Progress like the healthcare company that built a $25 million facility with 200 jobs, and the new Starbucks. But along the main street, where much of the violence erupted, some businesses are back, some are not.
It's kind of hard to come in a candy store and be angry. I mean,
Arthur Drake laughs now, but was devastated when his family's business burned to the ground. Now, right across the street, he's just started over again.
I mean, the community has showed a lot of support.
He won't say which candidate gets his vote.
We've changed a tremendous amount in this community.
People still feel like they be mistreated.
A still deeply divided city deciding which vision of their community is closer to reality. Ron Allen, NBC News, Ferguson.
When we come back, spying on the King of England, new insights into a scandalous chapter in British history. With all the claims in Washington about surveillance and wiretapping we've heard in recent weeks, it's worth noting that there is a long history of such activities. Tonight, a British documentary looks into how the government there decided to listen in on its own king in the midst of a scandalous affair many years ago. NBC's Kelly Kobiella has more.
Edward VIII,
a few hours ago,
the only British king to give up the throne.
That the decision I have made has been mine and mine alone.
Choosing love and a life with American divorcee Wallis Simpson over power. Family, church, and country did not approve. Now, a new British documentary called Spying on the Royals dives deep into a secret government plot to eavesdrop on the king and his lover. Top secret documents unsealed in 2013 after nearly 80 years show the king was under surveillance, treated like an enemy spy. The Prime Minister himself asking MI5 to tap the wires at Buckingham Palace.
To ask an intelligence agency to bug, to tap, to surveil the head of state is frankly unheard of.
The operation went down here in Green Park. In the shadow of the palace, agents disguised as utility workers opened a phone exchange box tied to the palace, tapping the wires, listening in.
As far as we can see, MI5 creates almost a little unit within MI5 to keep this secret from the rest of MI5.
It was that sensitive. The year 1936, Europe on the edge of war. The Prime Minister worried about Edward. Was he under Wallace Simpson's spell? Was he cozying up to Hitler and a rising far right in Britain? Could he force a coup? But in the end, the biggest bombshell? An intercepted call of Edward telling his brother he'd take Wallace over Crown and Country. And the rest is history. Kelly Kobiella, NBC News, London.
And up next, a teacher provides a powerful lesson on what's possible. Finally tonight, is there any child who doesn't dream of owning and riding a bike? It's a milestone for most kids, except when families can't afford it. That was the case for many of the kids at a school in South Carolina until a first-grade teacher had an idea. NBC's Tammy Leitner has the story.
We all remember that feeling. The wind in your face, the thrill of the unknown, tasting freedom. For most kids, a bike is a rite of passage. But for these students at Pepper Hill Elementary in Charleston, South Carolina, many have never ridden, let alone owned a new bike.
About 90% of our families are at or below the poverty line.
It's often a struggle.
I once walked home a kindergartner 30 minutes uphill because there was no bus that went to the area he lived in, and there was no bike. So rain, below freezing temperatures, this kindergartner is walking to and from school.
A long walk and a persistent first grader named Jawan inspired Katie Blumquist.
He kept asking me for a bike as his gift, and I just couldn't afford it. So I thought maybe I would do a GoFundMe.
Donations poured in. Over 7 months, more than $80,000. Enough for Jawan's bike and bikes for all 650 students at the school. And for the small kids, 100 tricycles put together by the community. Bells and locks donated by local bike builders. The big day arrived, and the kids had no idea.
Every single one of you is getting a brand new bike!
Some knew immediately what to do.
Ready?
Others, not so sure.
You know how to ride? Not yet.
But one thing was a hit with everyone.
It's really cool. I like the bells.
Today, a dream come true for hundreds of kids and one teacher.
Every child deserves joy. It is a basic childhood right, and a bike is one of many things that represents joy.
And the inspiration to go places. Tammy Leitner, NBC News, Charleston, South Carolina.
And the bell is the best part. That is NBC Nightly News for this Sunday night. Lester Holt will be reporting live from South Korea tomorrow for special coverage of the North Korean threat. I'm Kate Snow reporting from New York. I'll see you tomorrow on MSNBC. For all of us here at NBC News, have a great night.
Watch NBC News than any other news organization in the world.